life is a rock, but the radio rolled me. Hey, welcome back. I am so glad that you could join me. Today we're going to talk about education and the possibilities. I so appreciate you being here. I was out and about the other day and I was recording a vlog about this job opportunity that I have sitting in front of me. And it's an opportunity to make really quite a bit of money. And it's legal. And as I talked about that, I also delved into my educational background. And while I was editing that video, I thought, I think I just want to do one on my educational background. And why I don't have a lot of sympathy for people who say they can't make it in this world without a formal college education that it seems that more and more people want given to them. Now, I make a very good amount of money, well above national average. I don't mean I'm ever going to be hanging out with the Rockefellers, sipping tea. I've never had caviar. I don't even really like champagne. I don't own a boat, much less a yacht, but I do all right for myself, and I'm well compensated. Now, that doesn't mean I have a lot left over at the end of a paycheck. I've spent money rather foolishly, and now I'm trying to catch up paying off all those bills and everything else, but I make good money. I never even graduated high school. I was 2 or 3 months short of graduating, and because of my situation, had to get a job. I was underage, didn't really have anybody who was legally responsible for me, out on my own. And I was getting by with the help of friends. It wasn't so bad because then I could work at, say, McDonald's part-time, go to school, and still make ends meet. But then a lot of that fell through. So I had to get a full-time job. Well, the full-time job wasn't enough. Because of other circumstances, turned out I had to join the Army. And I had to join the Army because none of the other branches at the time would take you without a diploma. So very shortly after I turned 18, joined the Army. Spent almost 4 years in the Army doing two-way radio repair, which gave me a basic electronics background. It was actually field radio repair, 31 Echo. But it taught me how to troubleshoot. It taught me about systems. And it taught me a lot of things like that. Now, while I was in the Army, the edict came down that thou shalt have at least a GED. So I had to go to some refresher courses and get my GED, which is like a 10th grade level certification. So I was certified for 10th grade. Whew. Now, that's not to say that I'm not bright. Keep in mind, I almost maxed my ASVAB when I first took it. I think I missed 2 questions. Almost maxed it. So when I got out of the Army, there wasn't a whole lot of need to repair military radios in the civilian world. Quite honestly, the technology that I was exposed to was still a lot of that Vietnam era technology, and the commercial world was doing much cooler things, but I wasn't prepared for it. Still, I got a job at a company that did two-way radio communications, installing and repairing radios. And in the meantime, I got interested in computers as a hobby. It took me forever to get my first computer working. I wasn't terribly good at it, but I stuck with it. Got involved in programming. So when I was working on two-way radios, I crossed over a lot into cell phones. So I remember the big cell phones where you carried around in like a bag and it was half battery. I remember the big Motorola cell phones that you hold up to your head. The cell phones where your mobile cell phone was this big box in your trunk and you had to run cables up to your dash. And at that point, it was just a handset. But with cell phones, there was a lot more computer involvement. So I really kind of made the migration from radios to computers. Of course, being involved in radios, I got involved in ham radio. Ham radio kind of dovetails a little bit with computer stuff. It was all kind of married to each other to put me in that environment. And in the course of that, I spent a lot of time, for lack of a better word, it was studying. But it was building computers and experimenting and doing things and trying to figure out how it all worked, really delving into it because I had a passion for it. I at least had an interest in it. So I spent a lot of nights where I would come home and just dig into computer stuff. My wife has always been very patient, very supportive, to a fault sometimes, but I wouldn't have her any other way. So we would spend nights on end sitting there in the bedroom while I worked on the computer all night long. Often till wee hours. So I got better at it, and I worked it for years. I was working at a company that was the sister company of where my wife worked, and both companies did like junk mail, brochures, that kind of stuff. So my job at this company was very untechnical because it was the job I could find. And I would take huge stacks of paper off of the pallet, line them up on the cutter for the guy who was actually trained to use the cutter, and he would cut these stacks of paper that were like, a foot thick. The blade would just come down like a guillotine. And then my job would be to take those stacks all cut up, put them back on another pallet. So at the time I was reading I think it was Borland's book of C++, this thick. Okay, maybe not quite that thick. It was, this thick. So the owner of the company came through and, saying hello to everybody. He was really saying hello to the cutter because he knew him. I was a nobody. He asked if that was my book. I was like, yep. He said, you know that stuff? Well, I'm learning. That's why I'm reading the book. He's like, well, what are you doing here? I'm making a paycheck. He said, oh, you're being wasted here. So he had me work with the guy who was in charge of all the computers and stuff in the plant. So it wasn't high-tech computers by any means. I used to get to load up the big tape reels into the tape reader, and that would be just a list of addresses that would be ink-jetted onto the mailings. That would go through a conveyor belt, and the inkjets would spray the address onto it like a big honk. It was a huge honking printer. So I did that for a long time, and in the meantime, met my wife, got married. It wasn't too long after that, I actually went out and looked for a computer job, doing actual computers, full-time. And I ended up with a job where I was fixing people's home PCs. They'd bring it into the shop. Occasionally I'd go deliver one and set it up for them. It was pretty basic work, but it was a great training ground. Because while I was doing that, I was learning about networking. And again, it was a lot of hours at night. It was a lot of overtime, just learning. I wasn't spending all my time on Instagram and down at the mall and wherever else people waste their time these days. I was at books. I was going after certifications. I was learning the whole time on my own. And then I started learning about networking. And I got involved in that. Little more, learning the whole time on my own, getting deeper into it, getting more certifications. Until I became a highly certified and very proficient network engineer with some of the highest certifications in the industry. I really pursued it. It was a lot of time and effort and a fair amount of money, but mostly it was time and effort that I just did on my own. And for the most part, my employers didn't pay for this. I didn't have access to fancy courses, fancy classes. I didn't go to college, didn't graduate high school, and I'm making some pretty ridiculous money. For Pete's sake, I'm riding a Harley Davidson. People are like, oh, you're on a Harley, you must have a lot of money. Well, no, I used to before I bought a Harley. So, I look around and I'm working a job where most of my coworkers are college educated. Most of them have military training that also assisted in putting them where they are. And they've put so much into their careers, and we're kind of head to head. Pretty sure I make the same ballpark figures that they do. I have the same opportunities that they do. I never graduated high school, but I worked for it. I put in the time. I hear people that say, oh, I can't get anywhere because I don't have this education. I can't get this because I can't get that. I can't do this because I can't do that. Here's my advice to younger people, which doesn't apply to most of you. You can do anything you want. You really can. The question is if you're going to wait for it to be handed to you, because it won't be. Okay, 99% of the time, it won't be. And that goes for anything you try to do, whether it's being a YouTube star, a musician, or what have you. It's not going to be handed to you. You have to go for it. I think I've talked before about how somebody I knew wanted to be an actress. I said, well, Hollywood's not going to just call you. If you want to be an actress, work on your craft, work on the art of acting, get little jobs in local theaters, and work it like your life depends on it. Be good at it. Earn yourself a name where you are. And I say that because it's the same thing that I did. I started out small. I took what I knew, and I ran with it. There were a few job interviews I may have over-exaggerated my skill set, but not a whole lot. Not so much that I couldn't work my way through it, but I was asked to step up. And it just made me cram that much more. I just had to study and learn and understand it all. I'm got a C-17 taken up to the right of me. It's really pretty close. It's such a gorgeous plane. But that's the thing. If you're expecting somebody to hand it to you, don't hold your breath. You're wasting your time, and all you're doing is being whiny. Go get it. Learn it. Start small. If you want to start computers, put a computer together. crack a book. You know, there are still libraries, and with the internet, there are so many resources available to you. And you can't say that you don't have opportunities if you have a cell phone. Google, YouTube, they're all huge libraries. There are a bunch of other libraries that are available to you. And you know, if you have to go old school and actually go find a library, do it. And sometimes it gets to where you have to invest a little bit in your education. And I don't mean, you know, paying down for the school, although that may be it if that's open to you. Buy a book, buy used books, get something, do something, put effort into it, because that's really where you succeed. I went to work for a company once up in New Hampshire. They were a Mac store or a Mac dealer. And I basically went and told the guy, I said, I will, and I had another job. I had a full-time job. I was the network manager for New Hampshire. Another pretty well-paying job. And I went to him and said, I will work for you at minimum wage if you let me learn how to fix Macs. And I did. I absolutely did. So sometimes you got to get creative with it, but you know, I can't do it because somebody won't give me a handout. That's an excuse. And that's also to say that, you know, college isn't always the answer. I was pretty excited when my son went to a technical type school instead of a college. For one thing, he hated school. College probably wasn't a good answer for him. But I'm here, so I'm going to leave it at that. Give you something to chew on. Appreciate you riding with me. Thanks for your time once again. And go do something nice for somebody this week. See if we can't all make the world a little bit better. Have a great day. Thanks. Bye.